Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. We have a special guest in, but before we get that, I tell you what, let's go ahead and articulate what the show is going to be all about, and then we'll get moving on the other side. And by the way, the phones are open. 346-248-7799, code 254-600-9091. Again, the number is 346-248-7799. And of course, the ID to get in through Zoom, 254-600-9091. We're going to have a great show for you today, so stick around. If you're just joining us, folks, the first thing that I ask you to do is I ask you so kindly to go ahead and share our program. This is going to be a great show on, we're going to talk the abortion issue and the law. You know, the Supreme Court just passed some issues a while back. We're going to discuss that in detail with a professor from Florida State University, very good speaker. We're also going to talk about the coronavirus and what's going on with forcing people back to school, forcing all these things in action, maybe before time. I mean, let's talk about that. And I'm going to show you why this is very difficult. It is very difficult, having a lot to do with the narrative, the counter narrative that's going on out there that is outright dangerous. It's outright childish. It's outright everything that is bad. Folks, if you're just joining us, we just got a new flurry on. Please share this on your page. Please share this on your wall. Please share this through Twitter, Tumblr, and all the other social media areas, all the other domains that you control, your own social sphere, if you will, because this is how we are going to get the movement out. Okay, so let's talk about what is the show going to be about today. Title of the show today, Mary Ziegler on abortion law, Trump's corrupt bribe to open schools and country. Buenas tardes, Wesley Wyan. AVQ, watching on YouTube and watching from New York City. Michael Rutnin, how are you doing, my brothers and my sisters? Where are my sisters? I know we're going to have 20, 30, 40 by the time we are done here, but we are starting. FSU professor Mary Ziegler discusses America's abortion fiasco. Trump's bribery and coercion to force the economy open at whose peril? Your peril, our peril. We had the opportunity to speak to Mary Ziegler, who knows the entire history of the abortion debate. Mary Ziegler has appeared in every major newspaper discussing these issues. She takes some of the most present questions today. Mary is the author of Abortion and the Law in America. Later, we discuss the evilness. Well, actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start there because I had a few discussions on the internet about this issue. But before I get into that, I want to say, you know, a lot of people that are progressives, a lot of Republicans that just know the country is going into the wrong direction, conservatives who are all forming groups to go ahead and fight against this evil president, fight against this incompetent imbecile. We have a whole lot of Republicans that are joining together. We have the Lincoln Project that's making some of the absolute best ads, better than any Democrat, better than any independent, better than anything I could come up with, where they really point out with a hammer how horrendous a president Donald Trump is. I'm not going to play any of their ads, but we blog their ads all the time. So if you go to egbertowillis.com, you'll see several of the blogs that we've written about these ads that they're doing. But above and beyond, Republicans are starting to engage. They are starting not to buy the con anymore. They are starting to come to their senses. And in Biden, what they get, they get something. You know, progressives were not enamored with Biden, but we are going to support Biden. Most of us are. But in Biden, they see somebody they can work with. Anyhow, I want to show you guys something because this was distressing. I don't remember who sent me this particular little image or this little video here, but it was kind of intriguing. And why was it intriguing? I want you to check this out. I want you to look and look. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger so that Let's see. Yeah, it looks like I can make it a little bigger. Okay, here's what I want you to see. As I play this, and for those of you that are only listening on radio, I'm going to I'm going to narrate it before I play the video. But we have the governor of Florida saying that DeSantis saying that right now things are better than they were in March, and right next to him is the graph that explains exactly how the state is doing relative to March. And they have the video showing that so that you can see exponential growth between March and now. The one thing that we have noticed with Republicans, because they have not yet paid a price for it, is that they simply lie. And in simply lying, there are those who are willing to accept that at face value. It is incumbent upon us, in my humble opinion, that we point these out. And that's the reason why when I got this on, I think it was Instagram, I went ahead and immediately shared it to Facebook with the expectation that we would have a lot of people to see it. And why I bring it onto the program as well is to ensure, in fact, that people see what's going on. But I want you to check this out. I'm going to play this now. Check this out.
I think that we're much better off today than we were in March, and we're much better off to weather compared to what some of those other areas are. I think that we're much better off today than we were in March, and we're much better off to weather compared to what some of those other areas are. I think that we.
Okay. Now, for those of you who are watching it on YouTube, on Instagram, or on Facebook, or everywhere else, you got to see that video where you actually saw the exponential growth in new infections. In March, they started out at 32. Now, it's at over 10,000. If I recall correctly from the news today, it was at 11,000. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this for a very important reason now. I'm going to show you a thread that I had on Facebook. And the reason this concerns me, right, is because I like all these people. Like I tell you, I love everybody. But sometimes when you're in a thread and you're trying to tell somebody what you are doing is killing yourself, killing the people that you care for, killing the people that you love with the positions that you're taking. I went ahead. Well, I started out earlier a little bit tough, right? I decided to get tough on the president, and I said having a lying thug in chief is bad. There are many in the oligarchy who one can understand would support him for personal gain. In other words, there are a lot of people that hate Trump, but they like the outcomes of having a diabolical president, because the diabolical president doesn't care that his policies are hurting the middle class and the poor, because what is occurring is that their wealth is being transferred upward, right? And how is that done? Not having control on prices on insurance, not having control on prices, on unfettered access to financial instruments, giving tax breaks to these types of financial instruments that only the wealthy can take advantage of. There's a host load of policies that make a financial difference in people's lives. Many of them they don't understand because they're not financial entities. They don't know that when the government says, I am going to have to cut the budget, the reason you have to cut the budget is not that there's not enough financial base to tax from, but because you are not taxing from it, because you're giving that back to those people who are making money from doing nothing. You know, we've spoken a whole lot about that on this show before, but if anybody have specific questions, drop it in the thing or give us a call and we can talk about that. So I said, having a lying thug in chief is bad. There are many in the oligarchy who we can understand would support him for personal gain. We know there is not a symbiotic relationship between most plutocrats and morality. In other words, there are some good plutocrats. I actually believe, in as much as I don't believe Bill Gates or Warren Buffett are deserving of the billions that they have, it's an economic aberration that allow them to get the excess spoils of everybody else's work where they can accumulate on their own. But the good thing about these men is these men are not psychopaths. Mr. Gates is playing by the rules. Warren Buffett, they're playing by the rules. And they're also being magnanimous in that they are rewarding back into society that which they made through the rules that society operates under. However, it is a dictatorship in that they are the ones who are deciding how the excess spoils of all the people who've worked for them is going to be dispersed around the world. They decide that one person, as opposed to it being an egalitarian society where we all have equal access to success, where we all make decisions together, etc., 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 etc. Now, what is worse, however, like I said, most of them have no morality, these plutocrats, that is, because their sole thing is, how can I maximize on my money? How can I maximize on my income? Okay? Now, what is worse, however, is that he has a following from people. He is provably hurting from his irresponsibility, selfishness, and diabolical policies. He's hurting. And later on, I came up and I found this this article in our paper here, the Houston Chronicle, and I was elated. It said, Texans' approval of Governor Greg Abbott fell to 44%. That means finally we can get a progressive likely in Texas. We are going to get a progressive governor in Texas if progressives do the work that they've expected to do. And I know we have a lot of different tiers of progressives ready to do that. Beto O'Rourke and several, we have Castro and several people that good progressives out there that would do good. None of all of them are as progressive as some of us are, but then they're more progressive than most. So I posted that article that said, hey, Governor, he's fallen. The one thing that there's one person that gave an answer, and it touched me because, and I'm scrolling to it right now, and the reason why is because I sat there and it said, the answer she gave was, it's going down because he's acting like a Democrat. So, okay, it went down because he's acting like a Democrat. Michael Rudden, I understand why you're saying Beto is not a progressive. For Texas, Beto is very progressive. And Beto has a lot of progressive proclivities. But yes, I'm taking calls, Ron Cole. You can call me at the new number 346-248-7799. And the code is 254-600-9091. But before I take calls, I think I want to play the abortion issue, and then we're going to come back to this subject because I do want to get the professor in. So I tell you what I'll do. I am going to hold this for the end of the show. The professor's interview is about not too long. So let's go ahead and do the professor's interview, and then we'll come back to this in just a little bit. So here we have Professor Mary Ziegler, and we will be right back. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. I'm here with Professor Mary Ziegler, who is a legal historian and professor of law at Florida State University. Mary is one of the world's leading authorities on the legal history of American abortion debate. Her dozens of law review articles have appeared in leading law reviews, and her work on abortion has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, the New York Daily News, and BBC History magazine. She often shares her expertise with news outlets in the United States and around the world. She's written 3 books, and today we are here to discuss today's reality as well as her new book, Abortion and the Law in America. Professor, welcome aboard Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks.
Now, first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. What got you into this particular field that you're into?
So I started actually thinking about writing about this stuff when I was in law school. And we were reading about how social movements use law to change the world and to change politics. And I had kept kind of waiting for the book about Roe v. Wade. We had read lots of books about racial justice, about Brown versus Board of Education. So I was sort of waiting, where's the Roe v. Wade book going to be? And my professor said, well, there is no Roe v. Wade book. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Somebody needs to write that book. So I thought I would do it, which was kind of naive to think when I was, 24. But I've been kind of trying to write that book ever since then, because there's lots of heat on this topic, but not necessarily a lot of light, not a lot of actual information. So I was really attracted to the idea of doing history rather than advocacy about it.
Now, I'm look, I'm an engineer by training, and
Hmm.
I always have a basic question: what is so difficult about this issue? If an entity is attached to a person,
Hmm.
shouldn't that person who is that entity is dependent of have preeminence? Meaning, nobody should really have the right to get in and talk about what you do with that entity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's obviously been an argument that's been very compelling to lots of people in the United States and across the world. I think the reason that the issue is so difficult in the United States, and really it's kind of worth saying, the United States is fairly unique in that way, right? I mean, even if you look, for example, at Catholic countries like Ireland, there's been a more sort of stable settlement of this issue than we've seen here. So I think the problem here is kind of twofold. One, the United States is quite religious compared to other countries, and religious not just in the sense that people say they're religious, but that it actually informs their daily lives. They go to church, they actually seem committed to these beliefs. And many of course, of the religious communities in the United States are opposed to abortion. I think probably even more to the point, political parties have kind of been making hay on the abortion issue for a long time. It's a wedge issue, and political parties get something out of that. I mean, you need look no further than Donald Trump, who really it's kind of hard to imagine would ever have become president without the abortion issue or the promise that he could appoint Supreme Court justices who would overrule Roe v. Wade. So we have, I think, both in the Democratic and Republican Party, forces that kind of stoke the fires on abortion in a way that you don't see in other countries where abortion really isn't a political issue.
Now, I guess it's also a patriarchal issue, right? Because most of the people trying to build laws on this or put restrictions or otherwise seem to be mostly men. Why is it that in a population of over 50% women is that still the case, especially liberated women purportedly?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. So I think on the one hand, it's actually more interesting to me in some ways that there are lots of women who are opposed to abortion too. So just to take one kind of very salient example, Alabama last year banned lots of abortions, or pretty much all abortions from the moment of fertilization without exceptions for rape or incest. And the governor who signed that into law was a woman.
It was a woman, yes.
Yeah, and so one of the sort of interesting questions, is why that is. And so I certainly think that there are lots of people who oppose abortion, partly because they think it's unnatural and sort of cheating women of their natural roles, which is, of course, can be and often is a kind of patriarchal concept. But it's interesting how often women themselves belong to and even lead the movement. And some of that obviously is strategic. Abortion opponents have reasons for wanting to put women front and center, but there are women who are willing to be front and center who believe these things. And that's, I think, one of the reasons it's so hard to get to some kind of meaningful solution on abortion, because what would seem to be an obvious, women should agree that women shouldn't be regulated by men, is not something that American women, in fact, agree on, which is one of the reasons we have such a kind of dysfunctional debate.
Now, I speak to it as an economic issue as well, because I think many people just look at, let's say, disparities between men and women and as simply an issue of the way things are. Patriarchy, it has a lot more to do with that. Give me your sense of the economic issue that that childbearing and abortion has on women and have on women in the country.
Well, I think there have been lots of really compelling studies done on the consequences of denying access to abortion to women who would otherwise have ended pregnancies. So the University of San Francisco, for example, researchers there did what was called the Turnaway study that looked at what happened to women who had pursued abortion and then been denied because of state laws. And they found that the outcomes were pretty devastating when it came to things like interruptions to women's education or to their ability to hold a job and support children that they already had. Essentially, I think the idea is that people expected to be able to decide when they could have children or when they were ready to or able to support children, and then learned that the law didn't enable them to make that choice. And so they had to kind of adjust on the fly. And of course, those adjustments were disproportionately being made by women who were poor, women who were Black, women who had fewer resources to begin with. Because as you can imagine, it's always been true before Roe v. Wade to the present that women with more resources are not really as constrained by the abortion restrictions, right? They can travel out of state, they can stay in a hotel if they need to, they probably have jobs that will give them time off in order to have an abortion. Poorer women don't have the same luxury when it comes to childcare, when it comes to travel, when it comes to staying at a hotel, when it comes to childcare. So when you're thinking about the economic consequences of these laws, it's important to sort of think through the fact that they're not the same, that they're very different for different groups of women in the United States.
Equal application of the law, and in effect, implicitly that can't occur if there are disparities with the way states implement abortion. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about what does the right to abortion actually mean right now, it really depends on your zip code. So even if you look at where abortions occur, like a hugely disproportionate number of abortions occur in California, New York, and Florida. Now, part of that is because those are large states, but part of it is also because it's relatively easy to access abortions in those states. There are other states that have one abortion provider, maybe often a
Kansas.
small one. Yeah, Missouri is a good example, Kentucky. So there are lots of states where abortion is not officially illegal, but is almost inaccessible already. And so there are, if you think about it, there are already huge disparities geographically as well as economically and racially.
You segued into an important area, death by 1,000 cuts. In other words, it's not even necessary to abolish Roe versus Wade because there are so many restrictions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those? We had the attempts in Louisiana that was just dispelled by the Supreme Court, and we've had state after state, many of them considerably red states, that are doing all these techniques. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so we just had the Supreme Court, in my opinion, and we can talk more about the Supreme Court, but I think the Supreme Court case, which everybody heralded as this big win for pro-choice people, I think is not a big win, but we can talk a little bit more about why.
I would actually, you are one of the, I've seen articles that talk about Roberts likes to tie the knots very well. And because of the previous case, he didn't want, the previous Texas case kind of tied his perfectionist hand, but he pretty much gave the blueprint as to how that case should return to the Supreme Court for ultimate success. You just came out and said it was simply not a win. So why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so going into the case, one of the questions was how seriously does this new conservative majority take precedent? And in particular, this 2016 precedent called Holman's Health versus Hellerstedt. And that case mattered for two reasons. One, because it struck down this kind of death by 1,000 cuts law and admitting privileges law. But two, because it also made the rules that apply to all abortion restrictions a little bit more rigorous. So it was harder for states to justify abortion restrictions. And how it was harder was because the Supreme Court said, you guys actually have to show that the costs of these laws don't outweigh the benefits and that these laws actually have a point. So you can't just sort of say, oh, this protects women or this law is great. You actually have to have some kind of evidence that you know what you're talking about, that a court will take a hard look at. So Chief Justice Roberts said, okay, I'm taking precedent seriously. These two laws, the Texas law and the Louisiana law, are the same, so I'm going to join my liberal colleagues. But he totally rewrote the rules that apply to all abortion regulations going forward, and he made them much easier for states to pass. So now states don't have to show that there's any purpose to their abortion restrictions, and courts have to be relatively deferential to states when they talk about what the facts on the ground are. So even though the pro-choice movement kind of won this round, Roberts made it a lot easier going forward for abortion opponents to win subsequent rounds, basically by rewriting what the law was, all while claiming he was, pro-precedent. So it was I think Stephen Mazie in The Economist said it was canny, That's I think Roberts to the core, and I think that's kind of where we are right now in terms of the Supreme Court.
I don't think I had heard that no, well, you found an article with it, but that is interesting because in effect you're saying that this was a big favor for the next round. Yeah, we understood that he pretty much gave them the direction on how to write it, but you're telling me that he also made it, it was a slippery slope and that he made it easier for other states to do a whole lot worse.
Yeah, so when I was asked to write a bunch about this in a lot of media outlets, and so I wrote about it on the day of in the New York Times and a couple other places. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought that really pro-choice groups hadn't entirely won at all. Like I knew it was sort of not a big victory or it was a kind of temporary victory, but now I even question if it was a victory because I think the thing everybody wanted was to see that Roberts would have genuine respect for precedent. And saying you have respect for precedent while completely changing what the law is, that isn't respect for precedent,
It's
right?
just an underhanded way of getting where you really ultimately want to go, right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think if you had real respect for precedent, you would actually have to leave it alone, right? Not completely say, like, it'd be sort of like if you said, I have respect for precedent, Roe v. Wade is a precedent, but there's no more right to choose. Like, then you're just changing what it means to the point where the precedent is useless, right? I mean, I think that, and so it's also a roadmap because if Roberts wants to say he has respect for precedent, abortion opponents are going to have to, respect that and deal with that. But that doesn't mean that they can't get rid of protections for abortion along the way. We've already seen that.
In my layman way of thinking about the law, I actually thought that what Roberts was doing was being Mr. Pragmatist. In other words, he's trying to, there are certain things that how society has changed that his attempt was to be moderate and not have too many gradients because that's where you get riots and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But after listening to you now, I'm a bit concerned because it may be
Yeah,
that he's
well,
just a much smoother operator, especially for
mm-hmm.
a layperson with the law like most of us are.
Well, and I think your sense that of Roberts is absolutely right. I mean, the term a lot of lawyers use is that Roberts is an institutionalist, which means basically he sort of cares about the court's legacy, he cares about his own reputation, he cares about how things look, right? Which means that he doesn't want to do something that will produce a big political backlash, that'll make a lot of people, like ordinary lay people, angry. The problem is that if he does things in a kind of stealth way that ordinary people don't understand, the Supreme Court can achieve the same practical result, right? Whether that's on abortion or voting rights
Right.
or a million other things. And normal people won't understand and therefore won't care, right? I mean, there's not going to be a backlash if nobody knows what's going on. And so that might kind of be, if Roberts hasn't a brand that's emerging, that might be it.
Well, I mean, I think you've already proven that, right? The mere fact that most of us sit back there and still think, not still, but many still think that, wow, it's a big win. Yeah, a little bit of caution here, but it's a big win. You've just about busted a hole into that.
Yeah, well, and I think even with LGBT rights, of course, one of the other big decisions this term, the Bostock case said that Title VII, which is our kind of landmark civil rights law, also covers LGBTQ employees. And even that, there's been sort of an exception. The Supreme Court yesterday essentially said that civil rights laws don't apply to religious employers, more or less. So
True.
there's always been a sort of, the court gives with one hand and takes away
And
with the
takes it.
other kind of vibe. So I think
Yeah, but that was
proving a
actually
thing.
that was a dangerous take because I mean, employers can do quite a bit with that that
Oh, yeah,
new interpretation of the law, right?
absolutely. I mean, if you look at probably the most significant, so the idea that employers have to, if you're like a church that you can decide you have more latitude in hiring and firing employees makes sense, right? They call this the ministerial exception on the theory that, you wouldn't tell a church who to have as a minister. But the court has been extraordinarily generous to employers in terms of who counts as a religious employee, right? So like, is the janitor a religious employee? Is the person who answers the phone a religious employee? People who don't really do religious jobs, religious employees, such that employers don't have to follow civil rights laws. And the Supreme Court yesterday said more or less, we're going to just defer to employers on that. So if an employer says this person is doing an important religious job, that's pretty much going to take care of it, which, as you can imagine, employers will say, if they're religious entities, will
Right.
say everybody is doing religious work. So there's already a kind of big hole in the protections for LGBT employees that we saw the court create earlier this term.
Now, even without having to use the law, in my opinion, seems like COVID-19 has given sort of some power to states for, if only temporary,
Mm-hmm.
uh, ultimately get their costs. After all, COVID is going to be with us more than 4 months or so. So, I mean, there are going to be quite a lot of cycles that women pretty much, without having to go through the law,
Mm-hmm.
lose their rights, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some states we're trying, and I think this may happen again, some states were trying to, of course, ban abortion during the pandemic on the theory that abortion essentially used up personal protective equipment and hospital beds. And that was always a little bit dubious because most abortions, especially early in pregnancy, just involve people taking pills. They wouldn't theoretically even need to involve face-to-face contact. In most parts of the world, they don't require face-to-face contact. And they certainly wouldn't involve more, even if you have a surgical abortion, you'd have personal protective equipment, of course, if women continue pregnancies too, because then they would have to go to the doctor and go to the hospital for delivery and so on. Those orders essentially looked like they were headed to the US Supreme Court, but then a lot of these red states backed off, not because they didn't want to ban abortion, but because, as you know, a lot of states like Florida, where I am, unfortunately, have reopened and had surges in cases. So we may, if states like Texas and Florida feel kind of like they have to start closing down again because of the pandemic, I wouldn't be surprised to see new abortion bans. The only reason we don't see them now is because the president has been pressuring red states to open everything, including access to medical procedures.
Okay, let's go ahead and quickly get to the one of the important pieces here: abortion and the law in America. What is the person who reads this book gonna get out of it? How is it gonna make them that much more apt to the subject?
Well, I think if you care about abortion in America, it helps to know why people are always talking about what seem kind of like the facts about abortion. So I think the book is there to help you kind of make sense of why anti-abortion strategies are functioning the way they are, which I think helps you understand what's coming next and also be kind of more alert to some of the threats to abortion that you probably aren't paying attention to. So it kind of goes all the way back to the beginning to trace the origins of these strategies. And it focuses too on why often abortion opponents are not talking about fetal rights all the time. They're talking about things like abortion being unsafe for women or abortion causing fetal pain, this sort of world of alternative facts that Donald Trump's kind of put us in, right? Where we're fighting about what reality is and what science is. We're not fighting about who has a right to do what. And I think if you don't know the history and you sort of are reading about abortion restrictions, it doesn't really make much sense, right? You don't know why abortion opponents are doing this. You don't know what they're getting from it. And you don't know what that means for the big picture in terms of Roe v. Wade. So I wanted to kind of show what had changed and why it had changed and why it's been in some ways a more effective way to dismantle abortion rights than the sort of direct, there's a right to fetal life approach that most of us are more familiar with.
Going back to my original statement, and I'll ask it to you again, and that
Mm-hmm.
is, if that entity is dependent on you,
Mm-hmm.
why should I be able to tell you or force you
Well, I mean,
to do it?
I don't think you should. I think the answer abortion opponents give is that it's kind of a complicated one, but they would say it's a civil rights issue, right? And I think we'll probably see more of that coming. One of the interesting sort of pivots you see abortion opponents making, and one of the issues that's definitely coming down the pike, is to argue that women have abortions for reasons that violate not just fetal rights, but the rights, for example, of Black people. There's a new strategy to argue for bans on abortion for reasons of rape, sex, or disability. So you see abortion opponents essentially saying, if we're against discrimination, you shouldn't discriminate against life in the womb. Obviously, pro-choice people say that's not, discrimination law recognizes that there are sometimes real differences between people, right? For example, pregnancy discrimination law says pregnant people are different from non-pregnant people, and the law can recognize that. And so obviously fetal life in the womb is not independent, to your point, in the way that other people are. And therefore the distinctions are totally legit. But anti-abortion people don't see the world that way. And increasingly, I think one of the things I learned in the book was that they don't see lots of things about the world the same way. They don't see public health authorities the same way. They don't see scientific evidence necessarily the same way. They don't trust the media. And so we're in a position where finding common ground on the question you asked is even harder because we don't agree on basic facts.
Mary, what would you have liked me to ask you that I hadn't asked you?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything. That was pretty thorough.
Well, look, Mary Ziegler, a legal historian and professor at Florida State University. Thank you so kindly for having been here on Politics Done Right.
No, thanks for having me.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, folks. Anyhow, let's continue with the program. I said that I have a caller, so let me go ahead and take the caller, and then I will continue where we left off before the interview. Caller at 786, you are on. Caller, I can't hear you. Go ahead, caller. I just heard you for a second and then you stopped.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm trying to get you on for something I can't.
Great. Who am I speaking to?
This is Ron. How are you?
Hey, Ron, how you doing? Come on in, man. Talk to me.
So I see that your issue is this decision by the Supreme Court. Is this right?
Well, that is why that was the first interviewer. I'm going into another subject, but did you want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, I figured you played it for a reason. What's your current subject?
Actually, we're talking about the coronavirus and how the president is trying to coerce things to open. And I was going to show a whole lot of people and how it thinks and why things are becoming so difficult for us to come to terms with what's actually happening and why it's opening. The reason I brought up the abortion issue is that we just had a ruling from the Supreme Court, and Mary Ziegler, who's a professor at FSU, she wrote an interesting piece that actually changed a lot of my own opinions as far as whether the Supreme Court justice was really being pragmatic or was he just doing a whole lot more. And what she's proven with her statement was this guy knows how to use that bench in some interesting ways and to get conservatism into the sphere without actually people realizing how effective he is. But go ahead, Ron.
Well, you know, I listened, I watched and I listened to the entire interview by Mary and at FSU, which I'm very close to, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I have great respect for her. I think she's a brilliant legal mind. And, you know, I've studied law myself 36 years. However, I'm a little disturbed that she gives up on the premise of the original Roe versus Wade decision. So I just wanted to put that out, you know, straight up.
A little bit, because I'm curious to what you just said. Tell me a little bit about what you mean.
Well, the original decision gave women the rights to their body without interruption or interference from the government at all. That was the original decision. That has a lot of leeway, even today, in how the law can be interpreted. However, to defeat what she is saying, which is this conservative effort to actually change this through the legal process, you'd have to anchor yourself in a decision that is older and passed legislation with a controlled Senate and House with a presidency that rewrite the way that that's interpreted.
I see what you mean. Very good catch, buddy. Very good catch, buddy. Very
Yeah.
good
So
catch.
I like the way that she looked at it because I actually agree with her.
But you know what she's doing, I think, Ron? I think what she's doing is she's saying, given that it seems like the country has shifted rightward, not necessarily in a smart way, but rightward, she's playing on the maybe the ball field that she has, don't you think?
Well, I think what she sees is that we have over 200 justices approved by the Trump administration,
Right.
and other positions, and a series of other positions, including the Supreme Court. So she rightfully suspects that these might be stacked.
Right.
History shows us that stacked courts, at least 50-60% of the time, tend not to actually end up being stacked.
Well, look at what
And
happened
they
with the
make
all
this,
the appointments from Nixon and Reagan, right?
yeah, because it's the judicial has an interest in protecting their own 1/3 power. And once you become genuinely considered incompetent or illegitimate, you lose that power. So the judicial has an interest in
I,
keeping that
I
power.
like what you're saying there, Ron. I think I mean that what you said make a lot of sense, and maybe that's if you notice when I spoke to her, I said, "Wow, you're changing my interpretation of what Roberts was really doing. You're kind of putting me in the middle ground again, buddy."
Yeah, I really do think that. I mean, none of us can really interpret what these people are thinking,
Exactly, exactly.
but we have to take the actions that they take and try to do our best to interpret it. And to
Right,
me, it seems like not just this decision with Roberts, but a few of the latest decision of Roberts seems like he's almost sending a message
right,
that the judicial is independent. Now, I know that you kind of touched upon that, and I agree with you. Although I don't think that Mary is wrong in her evaluation.
right.
I do believe, however, that Roberts is taking into consideration a little bit of what you said, and he really is interested in the independence of the judicial.
Right. Well, anyhow, I need to go to the other subject, Brother Ron. So, anything else you want to add to our audience?
So, so the other subject, which was,
Oh, we were going to talk about why a whole lot of people are just living in la la land with respect to COVID, and why it's so hard to get across to them that this thing is real.
well, as you know, as I posted on your site earlier today,
Yeah, you work,
um,
and I didn't know that you work for. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us that little story you told me real quickly.
well, real quickly, I'm Chief Operations Officer of the Center for Pathogen Certification. We train, lots of nurses and doctors about pathogens, mostly bloodborne. But we also do a lot of investigative stuff. And basically, in a nutshell, what we've discovered is the coronavirus is airborne. It will infect you. The dangers are significantly larger than people realize. And we really are dependent on our ICU units to keep the death rate down. If we overwhelm them, then we got a problem.
Right. And tell us a little bit about Kazakhstan.
Well, there's a new virus that was discovered, a pneumonia type of virus in Kazakhstan, and it looks as if it's significantly more dangerous than the coronavirus, and it's killed about 1,700 people in a very short amount of time. So it's a huge concern for the CDC. If this comes up on top of the coronavirus,
But Ron, I
this
want
would
to
be a
stop you a
really
second and
good.
ask you something. I don't want to forget to ask you. So sorry for breaking in. Does the CIA is aware of this? I would trust, right? It's both the CIA and the CDC.
Well, I wouldn't, I can't speak for the CIA, but I would say that the CDC is definitely informed, and they are aware of this particular pneumonia outbreak that is a real concern, and it's another virus.
Yeah.
And it's described as being more deadly than the current coronavirus. And of course, anything on top of what we have is a nightmare.
And
And
one other question: have they isolated that virus and come out with the DNA sequence on that?
well, that's actually I don't know that, but I'm guessing that is the criteria that they're seeking right now, as far as to sequence it as fast as possible and try to identify what exactly it is. But
Right.
it's a second virus that, if it does spread, this is an issue.
Right.
So
Well,
any viral infection that we have, especially like corona or these are exponentially more dangerous than is being portrayed, at least by half of our American political system. This information is really hurting us, and it would be much better served if we stopped it.
Well, Ron, I am going to go ahead and look up that information so I can start doing a little bit of writing about that to post to our people, because I don't think I've heard it, on any one of the four majors yet. So I'm appreciative of that information. And if you have anything to send me on that, I'd love for you to just go ahead and send it to my info@politicsdoneright.com so that we can actually get this out there and let people just kind of be aware of what's going on to pressure. I also think that is something that says we definitely don't need Donald Trump leading the CDC in 2021.
I posted a lot more stuff on your website, but there's a history there. Let's just hope that if this really truly is a significant risk, that we react to it better than
Right.
we've done this time.
Thank you so kindly for calling in, Ron.
Thank you, my friend.
You
It's
have a
nice to
great
talk
day,
to you.
okay, buddy? Take care. All right,
You did.
folks, I'm not going to play the videos because I don't have the time to do that. So I'll keep those videos and we'll play them tomorrow. But what I'm going to do is kind of just go over this thing that I told you about, this discussion, and then I'll go ahead and run to the messages in 2 minutes. So let's go through this real 2 minutes. So as I told you guys, I posted on the website that, and for those who are just coming, yesterday I just started to talk to people about who are they're just not taking it seriously, this particular issue, and about our coronavirus and how dangerous it is. But anyhow, so I posted a thing that says, hey, our governor here in Texas, Abbott, is taking it seriously now. He's talking about locking down, et cetera, et cetera. I got a response from one of my readers that says it is going down because he is acting like a Democrat. So in tongue-in-cheek, I said, so do you have something against intellect? Smiley face, right? Because, I'm just playing with her a bit. Then she replies and she says, right, because shuffling COVID patients into nursing homes account for 42% of all deaths was genius. So what Fox News has taught these people to do is just have an answer for every, you give a statement, whether the answer corresponds to the statement you give, they just have an answer to move it in on a tangent, okay? So I replied to her because what I want to do is entertain a conversation. So I said, I'm a humanist, but you are having me pray for you. I knew you would recover. If I knew you would recover, I would wish this on you just to get you away from those lying to you. But because I know better, I must keep hoping you remain safe from it and hope that in time my words would mean something to you. Sister, this thing is real. She replies, do you really think we aren't all going to get it? And it starts with that defeatist attitude, right? Like the Republic, when you had guys like our General who said, Lieutenant Governor who said, older people are willing to die to keep this economy going. And we have Glenn Beck saying similar things. We 55-year-olds, it's not about us. It's about the younger folks. So we need to keep this economy going. They were laying the foundation for people to feel defeated so that they could just go out there and work irrespective. And the 100, about if that were to happen, likely close to 70 to 100% of people would get the virus, and at least 1% would die. I think Rudnin told me that he read it was 4% that'll die. I think I read 1% of the infected. 1% would. I think I read 1%, but 1 or 4%, whatever the case is, we're talking either 3 million or 12 million or something like that. People would die. So what I kind of try to get to her is, are you willing to live with that when we can mitigate that? Okay, Michael Rudnin just looked it up. 5.2% of people who get infected will die is what he says. And I can tell you from relatives who've gotten it that they have actually gotten a whole lot of different other illnesses assigned with it. So in other words, In other words, it damages your liver, it damages your kidneys, it damages your lungs, it gives you strokes. All these things that don't kill you hurt you. But the idea here is they are so programmed to come back with an answer immediately. And what I was happy to see is that there are a lot of people that I've addressed and spoken to on this issue. And in as much as I am very political, I saw a lot of people that have changed their tune. They've went from starting to talk about wearing masks. Well, they first said, well, everybody's going to get it. That was the excuse to mitigate that, yeah, they're actually seeing people dying. So they're saying everybody's going to get it, so what's the point? Then they started wearing masks. And some are actually saying, we can actually beat this. So my whole thing here is the reason these people are thinking this way is they have their inputs that are coming from the Glenn Becks, the lieutenant general who actually had the nerve to say that Fauci didn't know what he was talking about, a lieutenant general that was a radio jockey that doesn't know anything from anything, was talking about Fauci and all these other folk. Here's the deal. Enough people are changing their minds. We have to be concerned about the ones that have that mental makeup that there's nothing that's going to change them even if their ideology has been proven wrong. Let me run to these things right now. Mike, let's see. To all who say we will all get it, this is start digging your own grave. Exactly, Norman. You know what? I didn't salute all my buddies. Norman Reynolds, Michael Rudnin, Bruce Pollard, Mike Cisak, and don't let me miss you guys. If I miss you, write and send me a letter real quick or a notice real quick. I'd like to call all my people out. Mike Cisak, I called you. Masticator, Lee Grant. Who else is here? AVQ. Let's see who else is here. I got Norman already. I saw a lot of others. I'm scrolling real fast, so bear with me. Ron Cole, of course. Ron Cole called in. Juan E. Peña. Welcome aboard, Juan. Let's see. Rose Williams. Welcome aboard, Rose. Dimitri OG. Hola, mi hermano. ¿Cómo estás? Let's see. I got Dimitri. Let's see. Who am I missing? I saw quite a few that I got. Lee Grant. Wesley Wayne. How you doing, Wesley? I saw you too. Okay. All right. If I missed you, drop me a line because I like to call out all the folk. Okay. I like to call out all my people. Anyhow, Michael Redden says the expectation is that 70% of the world's population will become infected with coronavirus within 2 years. If there's a huge spike beyond that, hospitals' capacity can handle. There will be a triage and a large increase in toll. Hospitals' capacity can handle. Let me tell you something, guys, because this is what I don't think people are realizing. People get the cold every year, or if several times a year, some people do. Our expectation is that there's some vaccine for the coronavirus. But I want you guys to posit something. We never got a vaccine for AIDS. We never got a vaccine for the common cold. And every year we have to make some sort of a transmutation of the flu vaccine. And sometimes it's effective because we get the right flu virus calculation, and sometimes we don't. So we have to start finding. There are several things that we have to do as a society now that we know what a pandemic looks like. In my humble opinion, we have to start, all of us, whether you're on the left or the right, looking for true universal health care, because even Mike Cisak would have to admit that if Mike Cisak right now, my conservative brother on this show right now, if he gets the coronavirus and it hampers him from his farm, he will be in dire straits, and ultimately it could turn out that he loses it all unless he tells his doctor, you know what, I believe I've lived long enough, let me go. Now, let me tell you something, guys. I've already put that in. If I get a certain way, I don't want plugs or machines or whatever, let me go. Okay? But most human beings don't have that wherewithal. They want to try at all costs to go forward. So, this is the opportune time for all of us who believe in Medicare for all, not only to convince the Mike Cisaks and the Lee Grants of the world that it is the most effective and efficient system and prove it to them, as well as forcing our government to institute it, it is the time now to do it. With a pandemic where over 40 million people are going to be out of work, and how silly it is to have healthcare tied to employment, because all of those people who've lost their employment, with that loss came loss of healthcare. So just by one pandemic, we've lost probably 20, 30 million people who are laid off without insurance, are now uninsured. And those who have gotten the coronavirus based on what Trump and his allies are doing will also make pre-existing conditions and other issues come about. So this is important, folks. This is our time. We've got about a few months to really change the narrative. A lot of Americans are already on board. About close to 60% are on board with Medicare for All. We can get the others on board as they see the pain pandemics cause. And if you listen to what Ron Cole had to say, Ron Cole was straight up when he talks about there are other pandemics that could be on the horizons if it runs out of Kazakhstan. And there's a good possibility. I think Bruce just put a link in there. You guys may want to look at the link. I haven't looked at the link Bruce put in there yet. There you go. There's a denial according to what Bruce is saying, but we know how countries do denials, right? We know how countries do denials. I'm going to read the article in a little bit, Bruce. Anyway, we're coming to the end of the program. I want to thank all you guys for showing up to the program. I know you have other places that you can go. I want to urge you to support us as best that you can. We have several methods in which you can provide Politics Done Right support. And they all start with Politics Done Right. So if you want to support us via Patreon, please become a subscriber via Patreon. There are a lot of benefits you get from being one of our patrons. We send you stuff whenever we can. You have full access to all our books online. You can also, and I've just put that link in, it's politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. We also get your support at politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. We are looking for Facebook subscribers as well. You can become a Facebook subscriber by going to politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. And of course, please visit our store. Our store is at politicsdoneright.com/store. politicsdoneright.com/store. And what can you get at our store? Of course, our book, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Or, of course, you get our cup, or our t-shirts, or a whole lot of stuff. Just go to politicsdoneright.com/store. Folks, I want to thank you so kindly for being a part of the show today. We didn't get through all the videos that we needed to get through, but you know, you run the show, and we had a caller that had quite a bit of information, so that took precedence. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.